back to my channel. As you all know, this is dedicated to the cause of community medicine. Well, for quite some time, wasn't getting the right time and the opportunity of uploading the lot of contents which are already queued up. But now it's all going to come one after another, and let's begin with this very pertinent topic, that is the health hazards of water, noise, radiation and pollution. If you look at this very scenario, what is it remind of? It reminds you of a very serene, peaceful, natural environment. Whenever you think of something beautiful that keeps you at peace, we think of beautiful places, undisturbed, natural places. Anyone, if you ask, where would you want to be if you're given your free will? Most of the people will come out with the answer that they want to be with their near and dear ones at a place that's beautiful, undisturbed and peaceful. Nature on its own is beautiful, but then comes men in their lives. Well, women as well. And that changes the entire ambience of the nature. It goes for a transformation. If you look at this particular picture, what do you see over here? You see a busy street of a metropolis. People are busy, they have jobs to attend, they belong to a top metropolis, they have the best of their amenities available to them. But do you notice the tree? It has lost its leaves, and the natural environment is largely lost. In 1984, 30 tons of legal methyl isocyanate gas were released into the air in Bhopal, India, killing many. This is the scenario. When we move on from the pristine ambience of harmonious existence of nature and man to a compromised existence, to an existence where even human lives are compromised. And to the extent that it leaves the effect even on the generations to come. If you look at this picture, what do you see? It's a simple woodcutter who's cutting the woods to meet his ends. Does it appear from any angle that his intention is in destroying the world? No, it doesn't intend to. But what is the unintended result? That is deforestation. And what does this lead to? It leads to increased wildfires, loss of biodiversity, increased atmospheric carbon dioxide, increased drought, disruption of the water cycle, increased flooding, and the list is endless. But what was his intention? His intention was carrying out his livelihood, maybe catering to the paper mill, maybe catering to the furniture industry, to meet the economic demands of his family. But this unwanted activities, unintended activities, is leading us to a bleak future where we are exposed to all forms of pollution, be it soil, air, water, noise, radiation. It is a term that we are coming across quite often. So what is this pollution? The word pollution comes from the Latin word polluere, that simply means contamination. Hence, in layman terms, pollution is something that contaminates the environment. the presence of harmful substances in the air, land and water, which can have an adverse effect on living beings and on the environment as a whole, is called pollution. Substances present in excess than the desired amount that causes these adverse effects on human as well as all other living organism health are called pollutants. And this has been impacting our lives like never before. And in the recent past, that is in the World Health Day 2022, that's just the preceding year, our motto in the World Health Day was our planet, our health. That is one planet and one life. So let's take a pledge to make it a better world. So for that, we need a good understanding of these health hazards caused by all these pollutants. Start the discussion with air pollution. Over 90% of the world population lives in areas with levels of air pollution that exceeds the WHO limits. And this air pollution is contamination of the indoor or outdoor environment by any chemical, physical or biological agent that modifies the natural characteristics of the atmosphere as per WHO. It signifies the presence in the atmosphere of substances generated by the activities of man in concentrations that interfere with human health, safety or comfort, or injurious to the vegetation and animals and other environmental media, resulting in chemicals entering the food chain or being present in the drinking water and thereby constituting additional sources of contamination. What are the major sources of air pollution? They are basically two categories. One is man-made sources and another is the natural sources. Let me tell you one thing, the definition of air pollution, the sources of air pollution and the prevention and control is a very typical long answer question given in your professional examinations, and even from the PG point of view, it is a very commonly asked question. So what are the man-made sources? It is the industries, the automobiles, the domestic sources, smoking and many more. As for the natural sources, it is the atmospheric action, volcanic eruption, storm, microorganisms and radioactive substances. The air pollutants, if you look at the source-based classification, you can tell them primary or secondary air pollutants. Primary air pollutants are the ones that are directly emitted into the atmosphere, like sulfur dioxide, the nitric oxides, carbon monoxide, the particulate matters, and the secondary ones are those generated due to the reaction with atmospheric pollutants like ozone and other oxides of nitrogen. We can classify also on the basis of mode of release of these pollutants, which can be indoor or outdoor. The indoor air pollutants are those due to cooking, smoking, air conditioning, such as carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, the VOCs, and the outdoor ones are the industrial processes, transportation, releasing particulate matter, carbon dioxide, nitric oxides, and many more. We can further classify the air pollutants based on the chemical composition and size, which can be into the particulate matters and the gaseous ones. The gaseous ones are those that are miscible with air in the vapor form, like the oxides of sulfur, ozone, oxides of nitrogen, carbon monoxide, VOCs, and the particulate matters that are solid to liquid aerosols, which can be PM1, 2.5 or 10, that is the particulate size. Now in this context, it would be great if you know a little bit more about the primary pollutants. Well, the particulate matters include the microscopic matters suspended in the air or water. The airborne particles are called aerosols, and of which two are very important from your point of view, that is PM10 and PM2.5. The PM10 includes particles less than 10 micron in diameter, while PM2.5 are those less than 2.5 micron in diameter. The toxicity of suspended particles is mainly due to the particles with diameter of less than 10 microns. So it is the PM10 which is majorly causing it. They can be emitted directly into the air from anthropogenic activities like industry, residential, agriculture, transport, and even natural sources like forest fires, volcanic eruptions, and many more. And these particles can be formed directly in the atmosphere by physicochemical reactions with the pollutants already present in the atmosphere, and thereby they will become secondary pollutants. Now, coming from the particulate matter, let's move into the gases. That is gases like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds or the VOCs, carbon monoxide and lead. A major part of these is carbon monoxide, which forms almost a 49.1% of the total pollutants. Coming from this, let's have a look at the different particulate matter and the particle sizes. If you look, the molecular size is actually way more smaller, and the ones that's affecting us, that is between 10 and lower, that is where the tobacco smokes, the fumes, smogs, dust, those which are the major problem. Now let us understand the pathogenesis of the way air pollution impacts the lung function. So be it the natural sources, as wildfires or volcanic eruptions, or the man-made sources like the effects due to the traffic, industry, smoking, farming, the polluted air enters either in the form of particulate matter, which can be coarse, fine and ultrafine, or in the form of gaseous or volatile ones like ozone, carbon monoxide, aldehydes and many more. So what happens? These polluted air enters the lungs and creates pulmonary reflexes and leads to pulmonary oxidative stress or inflammation, leading to systemic oxidative stress or inflammation. The ultrafine particles actually are the soluble components, and they go through systemic translocation, leading to systemic oxidative stress again. And the pulmonary reflexes caused due to the entering of the particulate matter and the gaseous substances, it irritates the autonomic nervous system, and all through has a huge impact on the vascular and cardiometabolic disorders as well. So these impacts of the air pollution actually to a certain extent immediate and to a certain extent delayed. The immediate one are caused due to the high intensity of pollutants present in the air, which reminds us of the London smog in December 1953, where there were cases of even people dying of suffocation. The intensity of pollutants were so high. So immediately there may be death due to suffocation, or if it is a lower intensity, it can lead to acute bronchitis. While in the delayed impact, it can have chronic bronchitis, bronchiectasis, asthma, and even lung oncogenesis and many more. So let us see, the pollutants one by one and the impact they have. So one of the chief pollutants is the carbon monoxide, and the common sources are automobile emissions, fires, industrial processes, and the maximum acceptable concentration is 35 parts per million to in a 1 hour period to 9 parts per million in an 8-hour period. And it contributes to smog formation and leads to exacerbated heart diseases such as chest pain, may cause vision problem, reduce physical and mental capabilities in healthy people also. Now coming to nitrogen oxide, there is both nitric oxide and nitrogen dioxide. It is sourced from the automobile emissions, electricity generation, industrial processes. Maximum acceptable level is 0.053 parts per million in a year period. It causes damage to the foliage, contributes to smog formation and inflammation and irritation of the breathing passages, leading to pulmonary irritation. Another contaminant is the sulfur dioxide, which is sourced from the electricity generation, fossil fuel combustion, industrial processes and automobile emissions. And the allowed level is 0.03 parts per million in 1 year period and 0.14 parts per million in a 24-hour period. It leads to haze, acid rain formation, which subsequently damages the foliage, buildings and monuments and reacts to form particulate matter. It causes breathing difficulties, particularly for people with asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases and heart diseases. Coming to ozone, is sourced from the volatile organic compounds from industrial and automobile emissions, gasoline vapors, chemical solvents and electrical utilities. An acceptable level is 0.075 parts per million in an 8-hour period. It interferes with the ability of certain plants to respire, leading to increased susceptibility to other environmental stresses. And in human, it leads to reduced lung function, irritation and inflammation of the breathing passages, and bronchoconstriction. Coming to the particulate matter, the sources could be fire, smokestacks, construction sites, and unpaved roads. Sources of secondary particles could include the reaction between gaseous chemicals emitted by power plants and automobiles. And the allowable level is the 150 microgram per meter cube in a 24-hour period. In case of less than 10 micron size particles, and 35 microgram per million meter cube in a 24-hour period for a particle size of less than 2.5 micron. So this can lead to haze as well as acid rain, which changes the pH balance of waterways and damages the foliage, buildings, monuments, irritation of breathing passages and aggravation of asthma, irregular heartbeats in human beings. Now coming to lead, generated from the metal processing, waste incineration, fossil fuel combustion. 0.15 microgram per meter cube is the allowable error in a 3-month average. It leads to loss of biodiversity, decreased reproduction, neurological problems in vertebrates. And in the humans, it has an adverse effect on the multiple body system, may contribute to learning disabilities in exposed young children, and cardiovascular defects in the adult. So as we discussed, this acid rain formation, how it really happens. The industries are releasing the acidic gases like sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide, and these gases are carried by the wind and they're dissolved in rainwater to form the acid rain. And this acid rain kills plant lives, pollutes the river and streams, and erodes the stoneworks, that is, the damages the monuments. And I guess that acid rain effect on the Taj Mahal is probably not unknown to anyone. So you can see the acid rain effects on the sculpture in the adjacent picture, how badly it had eroded. So how do we monitor this air pollution? It is through, going through this range of sulfur dioxide, smoke or soiling index, heat and dust measurements, measuring the coefficient of haze, the air pollution index. It is usually measured by N multiplied by the sulfur dioxide concentration plus 2 multiplied by carbon monoxide concentration plus 2 into the coefficient of haze, that should lie within a range of 12 to 50. The National Air Quality Monitoring Program by Central Pollution Control Board has been ongoing since 1990. So basically, we should ensure that the P10, which we generally refer to the particulate matters less than 10 microns, should be 30 to 60% of the suspended particulate matters. should be less than that. So how do we prevent it? There are certain basic measures like containment, that is prevention of the escape of the toxic substance into the ambient air. And that can be done by enclosure, ventilation, and air cleaning. And then after containment, the measure is the replacement, that is replacing a air pollution causing technology with a better one. Like instead of coal, if you resort to solar power, it leads to reduced smog. Dilution, that is self-cleaning by the environment, that is establishment of green belts between the industrial and residential areas. That is, these green belts are nothing but plantation of greeneries that will, cause better air exchanges. And also putting in place strict legislations, that is the Clean Air Act, the Prevention and Control of Air Pollution Act of 1981 to be implemented more strictly. And at the international level, the network of labs are monitored by World Health Organization to ensure. After that, we come to the noise pollution. That is the unwanted sounds typically generated by human activities that disturb our ecosystem. Basically, noise has certain properties. The loudness or intensity that is measured in terms of decibel, that is the amplitude of vibration, which usually in case of normal conversation ranges from 6 to 65 decibels. While we are whispering, it is 25 to 30 decibels. Heavy street traffic can range up to 60 to 85 decibels. While a boiler factory, it may be so high as 120 decibels. And the permissible daily exposure limit is set at 85 decibels. In fact, at 160 decibel, there can be mechanical damage. And in case of the frequency of the noise, hertz plus 1 wave per second, the infra-audible ones are those, less than 20 to 20,000 hertz, less than 20 hertz, and more than 20,000 hertz, it is the ultrasonic. These effects of noise exposure can actually be two types. That is, one is the auditory effects of noise, and another is the non-auditory effects of the noise. The auditory effects of noise appears at 90 decibel and around 4,000 Hz frequency. It may lead to deafness, which can be permanent, irreversible, in fact uncurable noise-induced hearing loss. And this occurs mostly following chronic exposure to elevated noise of more than 100 decibels. And typically suffer series of small temporary hearing losses before permanent damage. So, you test yourself with your car radio and find it out. Now, coming to the non-auditory effects of noise. This leads to interference with speech between 300 to 500 Hz frequency, leading to annoyance, irritability, affecting the efficiency level, and brief exposure to extremely high noise profoundly affect the social, occupational, and psychological demeanor of a person. And the physiological changes, there may be rise in blood pressure, intracranial pressure, heart rate, breathing, and sweating as well. How to control the noise? There should be careful planning of the cities, control of the vehicles causing the noise, improve the acoustic insulation of the buildings, for less noise percolation from the streets, more legislative measures and implementation of those at industries and railways, and protection of the exposed person in terms of regular rotation, periodic audiogram, earmuffs, etc. Of course, strict legislation, and that most important thing, that is public education regarding this noise control. So basically, the water pollution is due to impurities present both from natural sources and man-made sources. So what are the natural sources or natural impurities present in water? They are due to the dissolved gases like nitrogen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and many more. And dissolved minerals like salts of calcium, magnesium, sodium, and suspended impurities like clay, sand, mud, as well as certain microscopic organisms present from the atmosphere, the soil, or the catchment areas. Now coming to the next category of man-made ones. That is due to the increasing urbanization and growing industrialization. That is the increased amount of sewage, industrial and trade wastes, agricultural pollutants, and physical pollutants as well. So how do you assess water pollution? That is, what are the indicators of water pollution? We assess the degree of water pollution or the extent of water pollution from the amount of total suspended solids, as well as from the biochemical oxygen demand at 20 degrees Celsius, concentration of chloride, nitrogen, phosphorus, as well as absence of dissolved oxygen. And these leads to various forms of water-related diseases. There is the biological ones, that is the waterborne diseases due to infective agents present in the water. That is hepatitis A, polio, rotavirus diarrhea, typhoid, E. coli diarrhea, amoebiasis, worm infestation, leptospirosis, etc. And due to aquatic host like schistosomiasis, guinea worm, fish tipworm, etc. So that was the biological part. Now coming to the chemical pollutants causing disease. It causes indirect damage to the human health through biomagnification, which we are going to have a better understanding in the later slides. So the third one, that is health condition associated with polluted water. That is dental health, cyanosis in infant, cardiovascular diseases, and diseases due to insect breeding in water. Now, the first term that we are going to understand in context of these is eutrophication. So what is this eutrophication? It actually describes the big problem in the global estuaries, the water bodies, which happens due to an increase in the chemical nutrients, typically compounds containing nitrogen or phosphorus in an ecosystem, and affects the marine life. Why so? Because it results in an increase in the excessive plant growth due to the high amount of chemical nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, and this is called the algal bloom. So when there is this excessive plant growth and decay of the ecosystem happens, because this excessive plant growth takes up a lot of oxygen dissolved in the water and leads to the decay of the ecosystem and results in severe reduction in the water quality, fish and other animal population. And this also lowers the pH of the seawater, a process known as ocean acidification, and it slows the growth of the fish and shellfish and leads to a reduced catch for commercial and recreational fisheries, meaning smaller harvests, and actually food gets more expensive. In this context, it would be good to have a clear understanding of the concept of biomagnification in the food chain, which is actually a resultant effect of air pollution, water pollution, soil pollution. That is, environmental pollution in all its realms, be it the lithosphere, be it the biosphere, or be it the hydrosphere. So how is it really happening and what is biomagnification? It can be defined as the rise or increase in the contaminated substances caused by the intoxicating environment. That is the environment going through overload of toxic substances or pollutants more than the desired level. And these contaminants can be heavy metals like mercury, arsenic, and pesticides such as polychlorinated biphenyls and DDT and things like that. These substances are taken by smaller organisms, like you can see in this picture the phytoplanktons taking up the organic mercury, and these phytoplanktons being consumed by the zooplanktons, and eventually the small fish, the large fish, and the human race. And the whole amount of toxic substances is building as it is going up the ladder of the higher organism. And these sources can be from the agricultural pesticides, insecticides, fertilizers, and fungicides, which are actually very toxic and are released into the soil, the river, the lakes, and seas. And also organic contaminants from the industries, the mining activities in the oceans, which release the such metals like zinc, aluminium, cobalt, etc. into the deep sea, and the level of toxicity is increased. And these toxic substances, as I mentioned, are absorbed by the aquatic organism and eventually passing on to us. So it has a major impact on the human health and making human more prone to oncogenic effects, renal problems, hepatic problems, congenital defects, respiratory disorders, cardiovascular disorders, and many more. In this picture, you get a clear idea that how it is bioaccumulating or how the biomagnification actually takes place. So where the DDT mixed in the water probably was at the level of 3 parts per million, 0.00003 parts per million. When it is going to the zooplankton level, it is 0.04 parts per million. And as it is moving up, the small fish at the minnows level is 0.5 parts per million. Until it reaches the large fish, it is 2 parts per million. And when the preying birds are predating on these fish, the level they are reaching is 25 parts per million, many times more than what actually was in the water level. So these biomagnification causes a huge impact on the health of all organisms in this biosphere. Now the question is how to prevent it. There are several legislations like the Water Pollution Law, the Water Prevention and Control Act of 1974, which looks into this, the Central and State Water Board, the governing bodies, and the measures involve the sewage treatment, industrial wastewater treatment. Now, after the water, which is a grave issue, is another very important issue affecting the environment, and that is the radiation. The transmission of energy from a source via waves or particles, which can be natural sources as well as anthropogenic sources. The natural sources are cosmic rays, terrestrial, atmospheric, and internal, maybe potassium-40, carbon-14, and things like that. But anthropogenic ones are the medical and dental X-rays, radioisotope occupational exposure, nuclear radioactive fallouts, and many more. So let us look at the types of radiation. So here we see there are, the alpha rays released in 2 protons and 2 neutrons during the ionization process. And if even a paper is there, it stops the alpha rays. Now coming to the beta rays that are high energy electrons. So they have less ionizing effect and they can penetrate the paper but can be stopped by a thin film of aluminium. Now let's look at the gamma rays and the X-rays. They're high energy electromagnetic radiations, and they are not stopped by a paper or a thin aluminum sheet. Only a thick lead sheet can stop the gamma and X-rays. Now coming to the neutron rays, that's the free neutrons. They are not stopped by any of these. Only a concrete or water body stops the neutron rays. So that is their ability to penetrate. And these, radiation have acute or chronic effects of health hazards. Like in the acute form, it might go through, prodromal stage of anorexia, nausea, vomiting, fatigue or sweating. In the latent stage, it may manifest in the acute stage as asymptomatic for 1 or 2 weeks, and then coming to the stage of overt illness, manifesting with fever, anemia, leukopenia, pancytopenia, thrombocytopenic purpura, diarrhea, motor disturbances, and many more. While in the recovery stage, which may take up to 15 weeks, and in fact, in this phase, if the exposure is such massive one, that's more than the 10 GeV, it may cause death even. Now let us look at the chronic effects of ionizing radiation. There may be somatic effect, there may be genetic effects. The somatic effects may involve the eye, the skin, the lung, with immediate effect of radiation sickness, or acute radiation syndrome, or there may be delayed ones of carcinogenesis, fetal anomaly, leukemia, and eventual shortening of life. While in the genetic effects, there may be point mutation and chromosomal mutation. So the radiation hazard actually depends on the type of tissue involved, whether these are the gonads, the lymph nodes, the bone marrows, or the thyroid gland, the most sensitive. The type of ionizing radiation. Actually, the ionizing effects are the corpuscular radiations are having less effect than the electromagnetic ones, while the X-rays are more ionizing than the gamma rays. The area body exposed, larger area of exposure, more bone marrow depression. And protective clothing goes a long way in reducing the effect, which is of very importance in those healthcare workers who are exposed professionally to these things. So the use of those radiation badge or dosimeters are highly recommended in them. The other factors that influences the radiation hazards are the intensity of the radiation exposed, duration of the exposure, and the individual susceptibility. That actually leads to the final effect. Now, how to protect? This radiation protection, the permissible dose from man-made sources, 5 rads a year. And in fact, the X-rays we often casually do are the greatest hazards. Adequate control and surveillance of X-ray installation is very important. Protection of the worker with improvement in technique needs lower dose, so one has to take care of that. Proper use of lead shield and lead rubber apron of 0.5 mm of lead, which is the minimum thickness to block those ionizing radiations. Workers to, as I said, to wear film badge or dosimeter to know annually the kind of exposure they are being made to, and accordingly change their position, placement, and so on. And for that, we need to carry out periodic medical examination for time to time assessment of their health conditions. And maintenance of radiation hygienes. And for these, the governing bodies, the International Commission on Radiological Protection, ICRP, and International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, and World Health Organization have been working at it. And the genetic dose should be less than 5 rams over a period of 30 years. So these are the very important aspects which one has to keep in mind. things about the different health hazards due to the different dimensions of pollutions in all the spheres, be it the biosphere, be it the hydrosphere or the lithosphere, in terms of air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution, and even the pollution caused due to radiation. So when you are asked to, write down, examination, you may be facing questions regarding what are the different health hazards under each of these categories. That is, it can be due to air pollution, it can be under the noise pollution or the water pollution or the pollution due to radiation. So what are the sources? What are the health effects in terms of acute and chronic, that is immediate or delayed, and what are the preventive measures to counter each of these categories. So hopefully after this presentation you have a clear idea about each of these. So you need to understand that and reproduce accordingly. Hope this is of help to you. Happy studying, and thank you so much for being part of my journey. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, but it means a lot to me and actually motivates me to keep on producing more academic contents for you all. Thank you so much and keeps shining.